It was Thursday morning in Burkina Faso when President Ibrahim Traoré was traveling in his bulletproof car, surrounded by military vehicles and helicopters flying overhead. This wasn't just any president. Ibrahim was the youngest president in Africa and commanded respect from every world leader. But something happened that morning that would change not just two lives, but an entire nation forever. As his convoy passed through the poor district of the capital city, Ibrahim suddenly saw something that made his blood freeze. Through his window, he spotted a mechanic working under an old broken car, and this wasn't just any mechanic. The president's hands started shaking and his eyes filled with tears because that dirty face covered in oil belonged to someone he hadn't seen in 25 years. "Stop the car immediately!" Ibrahim screamed so loudly that his driver slammed the brakes and all 30 cars behind them nearly crashed into each other. The bodyguards jumped out with their guns ready, thinking there was an attack, but Ibrahim pushed past all of them and started running toward the mechanic shop. Can you imagine the shock on everyone's faces? The most protected man in Africa was running alone toward a dirty garage while his security team panicked behind him. But wait, what happened next is even more unbelievable. The mechanic, whose name was Musa, looked up from under the car, and when he saw the president running toward him, he dropped his tools and his whole body started trembling. "Ibrahim, is that really you?" he whispered. But before he could say another word, the president of Burkina Faso fell to his knees in the dirt and hugged this poor mechanic while crying like a baby. The crowd that gathered couldn't believe their eyes, and everyone started recording with their phones because this was impossible to believe. But hold on, I haven't even told you the most shocking part yet. 25 years ago, Ibrahim and Musa were best friends in a small village where they had nothing but each other. Every single day they walked to school together, sharing one piece of bread between them, because their families were too poor to give them more. They studied under the same tree, played with the same worn-out football, and dreamed the same dreams of escaping poverty one day. They were so close that they cut their hands and mixed their blood together, making a promise that they would always be brothers, no matter what happened. "Even if one of us becomes rich and the other stays poor, we will never forget each other," they promised under the stars that night. But life had different plans, because when Musa's father suddenly died, he had to quit school at age 15 to work and feed his mother and 6 younger siblings. The day he told Ibrahim he was leaving school was heartbreaking, because they both cried, knowing their paths were separating forever. Ibrahim begged him to stay and promised to share his food and books. But Musa had no choice, because his family would starve without him working. "I'll come back for you when I succeed," Ibrahim promised, but Musa just smiled sadly and said, "Life will make you forget me, brother, and I don't blame you." For 25 years, their lives went in completely opposite directions, and this is where the story gets really crazy. Ibrahim joined the military and rose through the ranks faster than anyone in history, becoming the youngest general and then the youngest president, while Musa worked 18 hours a day as a mechanic, earning barely enough to feed his wife and 3 children. He lived in one small room behind his garage with no electricity and no running water, while Ibrahim lived in a palace with 200 rooms. But here's the thing that will amaze you. Musa kept Ibrahim's photo in plastic wrap and looked at it every single night before sleeping on the floor with his family. Now back to that Thursday morning when these two worlds collided again, and trust me, you're not ready for what happened next. After hugging in the dirt for 5 minutes while everyone watched, Ibrahim stood up and looked at Musa's living conditions, and his heart shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. The president walked into the tiny room where Musa's family lived and saw 3 children sharing one torn mattress on the floor and his wife cooking on a small fire because they couldn't afford gas. Ibrahim's bodyguards tried to pull him out, saying the place wasn't safe, but he turned to them with fury in his eyes and said, "This man is my brother, and you will treat him with the same respect you treat me." Then Ibrahim did something that made headlines around the world and caused massive controversy in his government. He announced right there in front of everyone that Musa and his entire family would move into the presidential palace immediately. Not the guest house, not a government apartment, but the actual presidential palace where Ibrahim lived. The ministers who were present nearly fainted because this was unheard of in the history of any country. "Mr. President, think about the protocol and what people will say," his advisor begged. But Ibrahim's response silenced everyone forever. "When I had nothing, this man shared his last piece of bread with me, and now when I have everything, you want me to give him crumbs? No, he will live like my brother, because he is my brother, and anyone who has a problem with that can resign right now." The power in his voice made it clear that this wasn't up for discussion, and within 2 hours, Musa's family was moving into the presidential palace while the entire country watched in shock. But wait, this is just the beginning of the story, because what happened over the next few months will leave you speechless. The first night in the palace, Musa couldn't sleep because he felt like he was dreaming and would wake up back in his dirty garage. His children were afraid to touch anything because everything was so clean and expensive, while his wife kept crying because she couldn't believe their luck. But Ibrahim wasn't finished with his surprises, because the next morning he called a press conference that would change everything. He stood in front of the entire nation and told the story of his friendship with Musa, and then announced something that made international news. "I'm creating the Musa Sawadogo Foundation with $100 million of my personal money to help every single person who had to sacrifice their education to support their families," he declared, while Musa stood beside him in shock. "My brother gave up his dreams to feed his family, and there are millions like him in our country who deserve a second chance at life." The announcement sent shockwaves through Africa, because no president had ever done anything like this before. But Ibrahim wasn't even close to being finished. He enrolled Musa in the best engineering university in the country, because that had been his childhood dream, and hired the best private tutors to help him catch up on 25 years of missed education. Every single day after running the country, Ibrahim would sit with Musa and help him study just like they used to do under the tree in their village. The 50-year-old Musa would struggle with mathematics, while the president of the country patiently taught him like a brother teaching a brother. Can you imagine any president in the world doing this? But here's where the story takes an even more incredible turn. 3 years passed, and Musa not only graduated from engineering school, but he graduated as the top student in his class, beating students half his age. On graduation day, the entire country watched as President Ibrahim personally handed him his degree, and both men cried on stage in front of millions of people. But Musa's speech that day changed the course of history because he said something that nobody expected. "My brother, the president, saved me, but now I want to save others like me, so I'm starting an engineering company that will only hire people from poor backgrounds and train them for free." Within 1 year, Musa's company became the largest construction company in Burkina Faso, employing over 10,000 people who all came from poverty. He built schools in villages that never had education, hospitals in areas where people died from simple diseases, and roads connecting remote areas to cities. But the most beautiful thing he built was a huge monument in their childhood village, with a statue of 2 boys sharing a piece of bread, and the inscription read, "True friendship knows no status." Now here comes the part that will absolutely shock you to your core, and I promise you've never heard anything like this in your entire life. After 5 years as president, Ibrahim's term was ending, and everyone expected him to run for re-election because he was the most popular president in African history. But at a national address watched by 50 million people, he dropped a bombshell that made the entire world gasp. "I will not run for re-election," he announced. "Instead, I am endorsing my brother Musa Sawadogo to be the next president of Burkina Faso." The country went into complete chaos because nobody could believe what they were hearing, and Musa himself nearly collapsed when he heard his name. "This man knows poverty. He knows struggle. He knows what our people need because he lived it," Ibrahim continued. "He built himself from nothing and built opportunities for thousands of others, so I can think of no better leader for our nation." The opposition parties went crazy saying this was nepotism and corruption, but then something incredible happened that shut everyone up. The media dug into Musa's past, trying to find dirt on him, but all they found were stories of his generosity and hard work. Every single person who knew him had only good things to say about his character and integrity. His former customers, from when he was a mechanic, came forward with stories of how he would fix their cars for free when they couldn't afford it, His employees testified that he paid for their children's school fees from his own pocket. Even his competitors in business respected him because he never cheated or played dirty. The more people investigated Musa, the more they realized that Ibrahim was right about him. Election day came and something unprecedented happened that shocked political analysts around the world. Musa won with 87% of the vote, the highest margin of victory in any democratic election in African history. But here's the beautiful part. On Inauguration Day, instead of making Ibrahim step down, Musa created a special position called Supreme Advisor and appointed Ibrahim to it, saying, "We started this journey together as brothers, and we will continue it together as brothers." For the next 10 years, these two men transformed Burkina Faso from one of the poorest countries in the world to the fastest-growing economy in Africa. They built a model that other countries started copying, where friendship and loyalty were valued more than political connections and corruption. Every Sunday without fail, they would return to their childhood village and sit under the same tree where they made their blood promise, now teaching young children that true success means lifting others up with you. But here's the most incredible part of this entire story that will give you goosebumps all over your body. Remember how Musa kept Ibrahim's photo for 25 years while he was poor? Well, it turns out Ibrahim had been searching for Musa for 15 years, using private investigators and government resources, but could never find him because Musa had changed his name slightly to avoid debt collectors when his garage was failing. If Ibrahim's convoy hadn't broken down that Thursday morning, forcing them to take a different route through the poor district, they would never have reunited. Some people call it coincidence, but others call it destiny, because that chance meeting didn't just change two lives, it transformed an entire nation and inspired millions across Africa to never give up on their dreams. Today, there are over 1,000 schools named after their friendship, and children across Africa learn about the two friends who proved that real brotherhood is stronger than any force on earth. The story spread across the world, and leaders from America, Europe, and Asia came to study what they called the Burkina Faso miracle, where a country was transformed not by oil or gold, but by the power of keeping promises and remembering where you came from. Universities wrote case studies about their leadership model, and business schools taught their example of how loyalty and integrity create more wealth than greed and selfishness ever could. But wait, there's one final twist to this story that will absolutely blow your mind and make you question everything you thought you knew about power and success. 10 years into Musa's presidency, a group of corrupt businessmen tried to bribe him with $500 million to approve illegal mining that would destroy villages. They thought everyone had a price, but Musa's response became legendary across Africa. He had them arrested on the spot and said, "You could offer me all the money in the world, but I will never betray my people, because I was one of them sleeping on the floor and eating once a day, and I remember that hunger every single day." The businessmen then tried to blackmail him, saying they had evidence of his past crimes. But when they presented their evidence, it was just photos of him working as a mechanic and living in poverty. Musa laughed and said, "You think showing people where I came from will embarrass me? My poverty is not my shame, it's my strength, because it reminds me why I fight for the poor every single day." He then had those photos enlarged and hung in the presidential office so everyone who visited would see them. This response inspired millions of poor people across Africa to stop being ashamed of their circumstances and start fighting for their dreams. The phrase, "My poverty is not my shame, it's my strength," became a rallying cry for movements across the continent, and Musa became known as the People's President, receiving more international awards than any African leader in history. But through it all, he never forgot to credit Ibrahim for saving him and changing his life. 20 years have now passed since that Thursday morning when a president stopped his convoy for a mechanic, and today both men are in their 70s, still serving their country and their people. They've written a book together that sold 50 million copies worldwide, with all proceeds going to help poor students get education. They travel to schools telling their story and teaching children that true friendship is the greatest treasure. In the world worth more than all the money and power combined, their children have grown up together as cousins and continue their father's legacy of service and brotherhood. Musa's eldest son became a doctor, providing free healthcare in villages, while Ibrahim's daughter became a teacher building schools in remote areas. The two families have become one family, proving that blood isn't what makes you related. Loyalty is what makes you family. International journalists often ask them what advice they have for young people struggling with poverty and broken dreams, and their answer is always the same. Never give up on your dreams, no matter how impossible they seem, because you never know when your Ibrahim will find you or when you'll find your Musa. Keep working hard, keep your integrity, and keep believing that one day your story will inspire millions just like ours does. They also remind people that success isn't about becoming president or getting rich, but about remembering your promises and lifting others as you rise. We could have both become successful separately, Ibrahim always says, but we became legendary together because we remembered that promise we made as hungry boys under a tree, and we kept it, even when the whole world told us to forget. The impact of their story continues to grow with movies, documentaries, and books being made about their friendship. But they remain humble and grounded. They still eat the same simple food they ate as children, and they still prefer sitting under trees to sitting in palaces. When asked why they don't enjoy their wealth and power more, Musa responds, "We've learned that the best things in life aren't things at all, but the people who stand by you when you have nothing and celebrate with you when you have everything." Today, if you visit Burkina Faso, you'll see their faces on billboards not as president and advisor, but as brothers and friends. Schools teach their story in history classes not as politics, but as an example of how humanity should work. Children play games pretending to be Ibrahim and Musa, not fighting but helping each other win together. Their story has literally changed how an entire generation thinks about friendship, success, and what really matters in life. But here's the thing that makes this story even more powerful and relevant to your life right now. You might be thinking, this is just about two special people in Africa, but the truth is we all have an Ibrahim or Musa in our lives. Someone we made promises to when we were young and innocent, someone we shared dreams with before life got complicated, someone we've forgotten as we chased success and money. This story is challenging you right now to remember those people and reach out to them before it's too late. Or maybe you're the Musa in this story, working hard every day, struggling to survive, feeling forgotten by friends who became successful. This story is telling you to keep going, because your Ibrahim might be just around the corner, or maybe success will find you in ways you never expected. The photo Musa kept for 25 years represents hope, and that hope is what kept him going through the darkest times until light finally found him. The revolution these two men created in Burkina Faso wasn't just economic or political, but spiritual and emotional. They proved that in a world getting colder and more selfish every day, the warmth of human connection and loyalty can still change everything. They showed that power isn't about controlling others, but empowering others, and that true wealth isn't what you keep, but what you give away. Their story has inspired similar movements in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, where successful people are actively searching for their childhood friends to help them. The hashtag #FindYourMusa went viral, with millions of stories of reconnection and support flooding social media. Companies started programs where successful employees mentor and sponsor people from their home villages. It became cool to remember where you came from instead of hiding it. Even world leaders outside Africa took notice, with the president of France saying, "The Burkina Faso model shows us that development isn't just about GDP, but about human connections and keeping promises." The United Nations created a special award called the Ibrahim Musa Brotherhood Award, given to leaders who lift others from poverty. The World Bank studied their model and concluded that countries with stronger social bonds grow faster economically than those without. But perhaps the most beautiful outcome of this story is what happened in their childhood village where it all began. That village is now a thriving town with schools, hospitals, and businesses because Ibrahim and Musa never forgot where they came from. The tree where they made their blood promise is now a national monument visited by thousands of people every year who come to make their own promises of friendship and loyalty. Every year on the anniversary of their reunion, Burkina Faso celebrates National Friendship Day, where people are encouraged to reach out to old friends and help those in need. It's become bigger than Christmas, with people traveling across the country to reunite with childhood friends. The economic impact of this single day is billions of dollars, but more importantly, the emotional impact is immeasurable, with thousands of stories of reconnection and support. As I tell you this story, I want you to think about your own life and the promises you've made and maybe forgotten. Think about the friends who shared their bread with you when you had nothing, and ask yourself if you've shared your success with them. Think about those still struggling while you're comfortable, and consider what Ibrahim would do in your position. This isn't just a story about two African men, but about all of us and how we choose to live our lives. The legacy of Ibrahim and Musa continues to grow with their grandchildren, now carrying on the tradition of service and brotherhood. Universities around the world study their leadership model, and psychologists analyze their friendship as the perfect example of human loyalty. They've proven that in an age of social media, where people have thousands of fake friends online, having one real friend who keeps their promises is worth more than anything. Their story also challenges the narrative that Africa is all about poverty and conflict, by showing that it's actually about brotherhood, resilience, and keeping promises against all odds. They've become symbols not just for Burkina Faso, but for all of Africa, showing that African solutions based on African values can transform societies better than imported models ever could. They prove that development doesn't mean abandoning your culture, but embracing the best parts of it, like loyalty, community, and shared success. As both men now approach 80 years old, they've started planning their final legacy, which is even more incredible than everything they've done so far. They're building a university that will be completely free for anyone who had to sacrifice their education to support their families. The university will be called Second Chance University and will have branches in every African country, providing education, housing, and food for mature students who thought their chance at education was gone forever. The funding for this university comes not just from government money, but from thousands of successful people who were inspired by their story to give back. It's become a movement where success is measured not by what you accumulate, but by how many people you lift up. Companies compete to sponsor students, and wealthy individuals consider it an honor to fund scholarships. The university hasn't even opened yet, but already has enough funding to operate for 100 years. When asked in a recent interview what they want their final legacy to be, Ibrahim said, "We want to be remembered not as president and advisor, but as two friends who kept their promise," while Musa added, "And we want every child in Africa to know that no matter how poor you are today, if you keep your integrity and work hard, tomorrow you could be changing the world." Their story has been translated into over 100 languages and is taught in schools from Japan to Brazil, as an example of how humanity should work. Movies have been made, songs have been written, and monuments have been built. But Ibrahim and Musa remain simple men who prefer sitting under trees to attending fancy ceremonies. They say their greatest achievement isn't the development they brought to Burkina Faso, but the hope they gave to millions of poor people that their lives can change. As I finish telling you this incredible story, I want you to remember that every single day you have the choice to be an Ibrahim or ignore the Musas around you. You have the choice to keep your promises or forget them as you climb the ladder of success. You have the choice to remember where you came from or pretend you were always at the top. The choice you make will determine not just your success, but your legacy and how you'll be remembered long after you're gone. The story of Ibrahim and Musa proves that miracles aren't just biblical events from thousands of years ago, but things that can happen on a random Thursday morning when someone chooses loyalty over convenience. It proves that true power isn't political or financial, but the power to change lives and inspire millions to be better humans. It proves that in a world full of betrayal and selfishness, keeping a simple promise made as children can transform an entire nation and inspire the whole world. So as you go about your life after hearing this story, ask yourself who your Ibrahim or Musa is and what you're going to do about it. Ask yourself what promises you've made that you need to keep and what friends you've forgotten who need remembering. Because somewhere out there, someone is keeping your photograph, hoping you'll remember them, waiting for their Thursday morning miracle when everything changes forever. This isn't just a story from Africa, but a universal message that friendship, loyalty, and keeping promises are the foundations of human civilization. Without these values, we're just individuals struggling alone, but with them, we're a community capable of miracles. Ibrahim and Musa didn't just change Burkina Faso, they reminded the entire world what it means to be human and what really matters. When everything else fades away, the revolution they started continues to spread with Defying Musa, becoming a global movement where successful people actively search for friends to help. Support groups have formed where people share stories of reconnection and assistance. Governments are creating policies based on their model where social connections are valued as much as economic growth. The world is slowly learning what these two men proved, that the best investment you can make isn't in stocks or real estate, but in people and relationships. Their story stands as proof that no matter how dark the world gets, the light of human kindness can pierce through any darkness. No matter how poor you are, you're rich if you have one true friend. No matter how powerful you become, you're nothing if you forget where you came from. These aren't just nice sayings, but proven truths demonstrated by two men who changed the world by keeping a childhood promise. As both men now prepare for their final years, they do so with the satisfaction of knowing they've left the world better than they found it. They've shown that success without sharing is failure, and that power without purpose is meaningless. They've proven that the boy sharing bread under a tree is just as important as the president in the palace, and that remembering this truth is what makes us human.